every week now we're doing these new Conversations with Great Minds segments on radio as well as on television. And our guest this week for our Conversations with Great Minds segment is Timothy Noah. He's a journalist, senior editor at the New Republic, and author of an absolutely brilliant book. If you don't have it, you should get it. If you haven't read it, you must read it. It's called The Great Divergence, America's Growing Inequality Crisis and What We Can Do About It. His website is timothynoah.com, spelled all the normal ways you would expect. And I'll be talking with Timothy here for the first segment or so, and then at some point we're going to open the phone lines for your calls. So the calls, if you've called about something else, my apologies. Call back tomorrow. But if you have a call to this topic, feel free to give us a shout. So Timothy Noah, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me, Tom.
Thanks for joining us. Tell us, what is the Great Divergence?
The Great Divergence is an increase in income inequality that began in 1979 and continues to this day. Some people think that growing income inequality is the way of capitalism, but in fact, from the early 1930s through the late 1970s, incomes in the United States either grew more equal or remained stable in relation to one another. I'm talking here about the relationship between middle-class incomes and the incomes of the wealthy. There was some convergence between those two groups in terms of income from the 30s through the 70s, but a divergence began in 1979. We've seen a growing gap between middle-class wages and the wages of the affluent.
Yeah. By the way, if my volume coming back to you, if you could turn that down just a little bit, I think your microphone is picking up a little bit of it. Well, maybe not, because I'm not hearing myself right now. Okay, I think it must have been your phone sitting next to a microphone.
Anyhow, my phone a little bit. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So from 47, from the 1940s, from the post World War II era, from the end of World War II until the Carter administration, basically, and in a big way the Reagan administration, everybody's boat was being lifted. The tide was coming up. America was growing. Everybody was getting wealthier. What happened?
Well, quite a few. There wasn't one single cause. There were a number of causes. There's one very simple cause that explains part of the story. Part of the story is the 1% versus the 99%. That's what the Occupy Wall Street protests are all about, of course. And that was driven by the financialization of the economy, deregulation of Wall Street, movement of investment banks from partnerships to corporations, and runaway CEO pay. So that's
these were all the outcomes of legislation, were they not? Changes in tax code, changes in corporate law?
Yes, mostly the doing of government. The movement of investment banks from partnerships to corporations was not instituted by government, but it was encouraged by the regulatory environment.
Right.
So that's the simple part of the story. The more complex part of the story concerns the growing gap between skilled labor and low or moderately skilled labor, highly skilled labor and low or moderately skilled labor. And there you have multiple causes. One very significant cause, which will be familiar to a lot of people who've been following the news lately, was the decline of the labor movement. The idea that a state like Michigan, where the modern labor movement was born, would adopt a right to work law, which in essence is a law that robs labor unions of union dues. The idea that that could happen, well, that would have been impossible 30 or 40 years ago, or even 20 years ago, I think. Private sector unionization has been in steep decline since the 80s, and it was declining at a more gradual rate starting in the early 1950s. It peaked in the early 1950s when we had about 40% of the workforce covered by union negotiating.
Now, this beginning of the fall of organized labor, wasn't that the echo of Taft-Hartley in 1947?
Taft-Hartley, yes, it was kind of a slow-acting poison on the labor movement.
Yeah. Which allowed states to become right to work for less states and opt out of all the provisions of the Wagner Act, and therefore
that was one thing it did. It also, we had a battle over card check a couple of years ago that wouldn't have been necessary if the Taft-Hartley hadn't been passed back in the late 40s.
Right.
It weakened labor unions in a number of ways. And so, private workforce went from 40% union to today it's about 7% union. So the labor movement has really been eviscerated. Whenever I hear anybody use the term big labor, it feels like a cruel joke to me. Yeah. There's nothing big about labor today, certainly not in the private sector anyway. Right. So that's part of the story. Another important part of the story is education. The high school graduation rate leveled off in the 1970s, and for the first time, the United States was not increasing its supply of skilled labor relative to demand, which grew and grew and grew through the 20th century as technology became more sophisticated. The early part of the century, we saw the advent of electricity and all sorts of other technologies, but the high school graduation rate was climbing fast. As of 1900, the overwhelming majority of Americans didn't go to high school.
So by the Reagan administration, basically it flattened out. Why? Is that because Reagan was the first president to put a guy into the Department of Education, Bill Bennett, who thought that public education should be done away with?
No, I don't think that's. I'm not sure that's what Bennett's position was then. I don't know what his position.
It was. He campaigned for president on ending the Department of Education.
On ending, but he did he want to end public education? I don't. I mean, maybe he
wanted to end all federal funding. He wanted to end the Department of Education. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know precisely what caused the problem in education. I think I think there are multiple factors. We could have a whole discussion just about the problems of K-12 education in this country.
Right.
Also, the college completion rate has not kept up with the college completion rate in European countries. That one is a little more straightforward. At least part of that is caused by the growing cost of attending colleges. Colleges have become a luxury item. There are a number of colleges that provide generous financial aid, but there are a number of other colleges that don't have much money for financial aid. Mm-hmm. And so it can be difficult if you're low income to pay for college. So those were factors. Other factors, trade and outsourcing, have been smaller factors relative to labor and education. But they've been factors, particularly starting in the 21st century. Before the 21st century, trade really didn't figure very much in the story. But with the rise of trade with China, a huge country with very low wages, that really did put downward pressure on U.S. manufacturing wages. So those are a few of the causes.
Mm-hmm. And to that extent, to the extent that there was government policy involved with that, I mean, first of all, we had tariffs that averaged around 30% from the founding of the country until the 80s. Now they're around 2%. But the Chinese also were aggressively changing their policies. Let me get your take on that right after the break. We're talking with Timothy Noah. He is the author of The Great Divergence, an extraordinary book. And the subtitle is America's Growing Inequality Crisis and What We Can Do About It. And we're going to get to what we can do about it in our Conversations of the Great Minds segment in just a moment.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
And Timothy Noah's website is timothynoah.com if you want to check it out. Be right back. Timothy Noah? Timothy?
Yes, sorry.
Hey, that's quite all right. We're still on the air. The one break that we take during this hour is at the bottom of the hour. It's from 27 minutes after until 34 minutes after.
Okay, sorry. I've got a funny light in this office. I need to care.
Mm-hmm. Okay. To continue our conversation, I was asking about, you said that China really drove this process of outsourcing. Everybody's familiar with NAFTA and GATT, the WTO in '96, I think it was. But that wasn't the trigger. Was it Chinese domestic policy, the decision to control the yuan or the renminbi, or however they say it?
I think more basically it was China's emergence as an industrial power, which was quite recent.
So they threw a lot of money into infrastructure and built their nation to be an industrial
and Mexico, power. We also saw a great rise in trade with Mexico, and that did have something to do with NAFTA. Right. There was an uptick in trade with countries that had significantly lower wages than we had here in the United States. And there was also a great deal of offshoring, particularly in the service sector, where you just sort of take certain jobs and move them overseas. And the interesting thing about offshoring is that it has contributed to income inequality, but in the future, it may stop contributing to income inequality because the whole kind of offshoring process is now moving into skilled labor, as well as unskilled and moderately skilled labor. And in fact, Alan Blinder, an economist at Princeton, thinks that in the future we might see slightly more skilled jobs than lower skilled jobs exported to places like India.
So the next group of people to take a big hit as a consequence of globalism or whatever you want to throw into that basket is going to be the people making over $60,000, whereas historically it's been the people making under $50,000 or $40,000.
That's right. And the economist Dean Baker has some kind of interesting thoughts about that. He says, for decades now, blue-collar workers have been lectured patiently by the affluent that we can't have protectionism in this country because that will merely impoverish all of us. And now, when it's the affluent whose ox is being gored, he wonders whether they will maintain that position or whether we might start seeing some pressure for the protection of upper income jobs.
When suddenly the banksters and the lawyers start losing their jobs, and journalists and the influencers rather than the influenced.
And the leading edge is doctors, particularly radiologists. You can be a radiologist anywhere in the world. And
to read an X-ray, a digital X-ray.
Right now we have some strict regulations on how much hospitals can use offshore radiologists, and the argument is that these offshore radiologists are not up to the standards of American radiologists. But even if that's true, I have no idea whether it's true, but even if it is true, you can bet it won't be true for very long.
Yeah, it's sort of the equivalent of a tariff or a trade blockade of some sort, and it will come down. Interesting. We're talking with Timothy Noah. He is the author of The Great Divergence, America's Growing Inequality Crisis and What We Can Do About It. We'll be back with more of Timothy Noah in just about 5 seconds here. Stick around. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. And Timothy Noah is our Conversations with Great Minds guest this week. He is a journalist, the senior editor at The New Republic. He's the author of a book, The Great Divergence, America's Growing Inequality Crisis and What We Can Do About It. And Timothy, you've done a brilliant job, both in the book and so far on this program in laying out this this kind of increase in inequality or collapse in equality and the egalitarian nature of our society. The second half of the subhead of your book is, and what we can do about it. So what can we do about it?
Well, there are a number of things we can do. Some of them are politically plausible today. Some aren't, but I argue in the book we need to start at least talking about them. One idea that I thought was really outrageous when I wrote it in the book turned out a month or two later not to be so outrageous. Before the book was even published, President Obama was calling for, in effect, price controls on college tuition increases. He didn't put it quite so bluntly as I do in my book, but in the State of the Union address in January 2012, he put colleges on notice that if they cannot keep a lid on tuition increases, then the government will use the considerable leverage it has to make them do so. That's one area. I think
why not do what Thomas Jefferson did in founding the free University of Virginia, what Abraham Lincoln did in founding the land-grant colleges across the United States, what three generations of governors of California did up until the Reagan governorship, and simply make college free?
Well, I would be all for that. I think state governments are moving in the opposite direction. They're defunding their universities, and of course, it's especially heartbreaking to see what's happening in the California system. I mean, that is a public university system that has been the envy of the world, and it's suffering very badly these days.
Indeed. So that's one solution. One solution is stabilize it.
No matter who's paying for it, we have to get some sort of control over these costs. And I think there's been very little consideration given to that part of the story. You know, the highest paid, last time I checked, the highest paid university president in the United States was the president of Ohio State. He makes like $2 million a year.
Wow.
That's outrageous, I think, at a time when people are struggling to pay for college.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And that's not even a for-profit college.
No.
I mean, I was thinking, let's ban for-profit colleges, and then you throw out a state university. It's like, whoa. Okay, so education, that's one. What else can we do about it?
Well, we need to revive the labor movement. I think that's hugely important. It's probably the most difficult challenge of all of the things I suggest in my book. But, you know, there's one interesting idea that's been suggested, and that is to get the right to organize defined under the Civil Rights Act as a civil right. You'd have to amend the the 1964 Civil Rights Law. Right now, it is theoretically a right we all enjoy to join or create a union in our workplace, but it's not a right that is defended very vigorously. It's even been suggested that the penalty for violating it is so small that it's economically irrational for employers to follow the law. That would change if the right to organize were put under the civil rights law. For one thing, if my boss fired me for joining a union, I could take him to federal court.
Yeah. What you're describing, you realize, both with, you know, making public education, college education very available and affordable, and by establishing the right to unionize, is basically what you have in most of the developed most of the developed countries around the world, Australia as well. But here, our Supreme Court has decided that we have an absolute right to own a gun, but we don't have a right to health care, education, or pretty much anything else, it seems.
Right, and practically speaking, these are all things we used to have in our society that have been slipping away. I would also call for re-regulation of Wall Street. I'd call for breaking up the big banks. And I would call for more aggressive oversight on the part of corporate boards of CEO pay, and anything the government could do to encourage that, I'd be in favor of. One provision in the Dodd-Frank law was the say-on-pay provision, which allowed stockholders to pass judgment on the pay packages of the corporations that they hold stock in. They can vote it down. It's not a binding vote, but it's a public relations humiliation for a company. It happened at Citibank last spring, and it was the lead story in the New York Times. Kind of that kind of public pressure is good, and more.
Although the CEO that's Jamie Dimon, isn't it?
Pardon me?
That's Jamie Dimon, isn't it?
Citicorp Jamie Dimon.
I think.
Yeah.
Well, whoever it is, I'm guessing he didn't cut his pay as a consequence of the stockholders saying he should.
That's right, but I'm also guessing he wasn't very happy to see that as the lead story in the New York Times the day it appeared.
Well, I'd take a bad story in the New York Times in exchange for $20 million any day.
Well, we're talking about cumulative pressure here. Yeah. We're talking about the beginnings of a movement. We are at the very
beginning of
that movement. I would also I've also talked about creating a WPA, a public works program that would put people on the federal payroll. I think there's real doubt about whether the private economy is going to provide sufficient jobs.
So you're suggesting the employer should be, or the government should be the employer of last resort?
That's right.
Yeah. Well, very interesting. We're talking with Timothy Noah. We'll be taking your calls for Timothy Noah after the break here at the bottom of the hour. 866-987-THOM, our telephone number. Timothy is a journalist. He's the senior editor of the New Republic, and he's the author of a brilliant book called The Great Divergence, America's Growing Inequality Crisis and What We Can Do About It. Stick around.